Welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Kayla.
I'm Josie.
And this is our podcast. Oh my God, I can't believe we're here. This is like a lighthearted-ish commentary podcast on real-life court cases and their outcomes, okay? We're two wannabe lawyers eventually, hopefully. And we're just going to be here breaking down litigation into some more digestible forms for you guys. So I'm super excited. For our first episode, we're diving super heavy into an infamous case shrouded in cover-ups, controversy, money, power, and if you couldn't tell by the title, it's time for Watergate like you've never heard it before. Now, Watergate's pretty synonymous with like a lot of things. Like we're talking political burglary, bribery, extortion, phone tapping, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, tax fraud, illegal use of government agencies, all that good stuff. But basically, Watergate is synonymous with the abuse of power. Like, you basically can, like, attach the word gate to anything.
Sneakergate.
Yeah.
Literally, like, everything.
Gate, Ocean Gate.
Ocean Gate. Oh, my, no.
Like,
all right.
Basically, everyone knows about Watergate, but do they really know about Watergate?
You're about to know about Watergate. So, let's set the scene. It's the early morning of June 17th, 1972, somewhere around 1 a.m., when a security guard named Frank Willis is doing his job and is making rounds of the Watergate office buildings. So, the Watergate office buildings are a part of the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. Frank is just walking around doing his job when he notices a piece of tape over the door lock of the staircase leading to the Democratic National Committee office. Frank is rightfully very confused, and as any good security guard would do, he initially removes the tape and continues his patrol of the building. But 10 minutes later, when he passes by the same staircase and the door and notices another piece of tape has been placed, he gets suspicious. So he calls the police, who enter the building and catch 5 unauthorized visitors red-handed. An article by the Washington Post describes the exact moment the men were caught. Kayla, do you want to read the article?
Yeah, so the article reads, the men wore surgical gloves, carried a walkie-talkie, shortwave police scanner, 40 rolls of unexposed film, and $2,300 in crisp $100 bills. They also possessed 2 sophisticated listening devices. I'm not really sure what that means, and they also had removed several ceiling panels in the office. The men emerged from the room with their hands up. That's the excerpt.
Yeah, it's like wiretap. So the cops were just like, what are you doing here? They had all of this like suspicious material. The sophisticated wire, I think that the sophisticated listening device has to do with things that they would use to wiretap and bug phones, but it didn't specifically say in the article. But obviously they have a random assortment of things here.
Strange.
Just casual grocery store items. So at first there was no apparent motive for the break-in. The 5 men caught were James McCord, Virgilio Gonzalez, Frank Sturgis, Eugenio Martinez, and Bernard Barker. So if you're watching this, you can see pictures of them on the screen now, but there's also a cast sheet linked down below for reference, especially for audio-only listeners, because this gets really chaotic. James McCord was a former FBI and CIA agent and was now serving as the head of security for Nixon's fundraising organization, the Committee for the Re-Election of President, also known as CREEP.
An unintentionally very fitting name, we'll come to find out.
Unfortunately, very fitting. Tailor-made, actually. The other 4 men, all of which were Cuban exiles and involved in the Bay of Pigs and other anti-communist Cuban movements, had affiliations as agents with the CIA as well.
The CIA literally stole my cat and they sold it for missile codes. Like, all roads lead back to the CIA, like, every single time.
Kayla, what?
Like, every single time the CIA is always at the root, guys. I'm telling you.
Oh my, the cat distribution system will get you back.
I hope so.
Yeah. So as the investigation went on, they soon realized this actually was not the first burglary of the office. Which,
no way.
Why you would burglarize the Democratic National Committee office is... Yeah, anyway. Why not? So on May 28th, 1972, less than a month before, it was also burglarized and wiretapped. Furthermore, the same team had previously burglarized Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist office in an attempt to find documents declaring him mentally unstable, as he was the defense analyst who leaked the Pentagon Papers. So, very convenient. Declare the person who exposed you as mentally insane as a scapegoat.
I do that too.
Yeah. So the authorities began to discover that the mission of the burglars was to infiltrate the DNC, steal top secret documents, take thousands of photos of papers, and wiretap the phones. However, the men had no idea who they were working for or why they were doing what they were doing.
I literally cannot imagine like committing a crime and like not know why I'm doing it in the first place. Like, are we using our brains? Or are we kind of just like, well, maybe I should do this, just, you know, for funsies?
I don't know what I would do if I was in their position. I will say, they knew that James McCord worked for the FBI and the CIA, and they assumed that they were working on behalf of the United States government for the common good, and they were told that they were fighting communism and preserving democracy.
I feel like we have to kind of discuss this, like, what even is communism? Like, around this time, the U.S. was... If you guys are just audio listening, Josie just pulled out the Communist Manifesto.
Out of my back pocket.
Which, like, around this time period, this is like the 1980s, 1970s, the U.S. was super big on keeping away the Red Scare. But, like, what is that for those who aren't, like, super familiar?
So communism is a normalistic government theory developed by Karl Marx in his book, The Communist Manifesto. Communism is often confused with socialism, but the two are very distinct and different theories. Communism advocates for a class-level economy in which there's no private property and everything is communally owned, versus socialism is more about the redistribution of wealth.
So, like, is this the same communism that, like, people were so scared of in the 70s and 80s?
So this is not the same. The way that Marx's idea of communism has not been implemented really anywhere yet. But yes and no. The Soviet Union was communist and was led by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the CPSU. However, the communism being practiced by the Soviet Union was one that left all of its people in extreme poverty and killed those who spoke out against it.
Perfect.
This was not what Marx had envisioned originally. The differences between communism, socialism, and fascism are often misunderstood. People use them kind of interchangeably, but they are very different. If you'd like to read up on that, we attached a really good chart you can reference below from the U.S. Navy. All right, so reliable. And we'll attach it in the description. Now, back to the case with some new context. The men were charged with attempted burglary and attempted interception of communications. They were originally convicted on January 30th, 1973 for conspiracy, burglary, and violation of federal wiretapping laws. However, Judge John Sirica felt something more was going on beneath the surface, so good on him, and demanded the burglars tell what they know or receive a very harsh sentence. So, with that on their minds, on March 23rd, 1973, James McCord broke radio silence and confessed in a letter read aloud before the court by Judge Sirica, writing, there was political pressure applied to the defendants to plead guilty and remain silent. Perjury occurred during the trial, and others involved in the Watergate operation were not identified.
All right, guys. That's just like the tip of the iceberg. So we have to kind of go backwards a little bit, and I know a lot is going on, so like feel free to reference the timeline that we have linked or the cash sheet. So in early August of 1972, while the court cases are still going on for the initial burglars, the Washington Post, specifically Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, which, guys, file those names away for later, okay?
Future
I'm not even going to
reference.
go there. I'm not even going to go there right now. But they snatched the story up and they, like, run with it, okay? So they ended up publishing an article reporting that, like, a $25,000 check has been deposited into the bank of one of the Watergate burglars from the Nixon campaign.
Whose bank account was it?
So there's actually, like, no reporting on whose bank account it was for some reason. I don't know if they're, like, just like sealing that kind of documentation, or like if they just were like, it doesn't matter, like it was deposited,
confidential documentaries,
you know. But yeah, so that ordeal is just causing a lot of panic in both the White House and the public, and like Nixon is not having it. Okay, Nixon is like, no, we're not doing this. So he, by the end of the same month, he announces that John Dean, who is the White House counsel at the moment, he's completed an internal investigation on the Watergate burglary, and he has cleared the White House of any involvement, which, like, at first seems, like, totally fine.
That's convenient.
You know?
Like, yeah, the guy that works for me cleared my name.
Right?
Why?
You're like,
so
okay.
it's probably fine.
Right, you're like, I mean, like, he kind of, like, that's probably fine. Like, it's not fine. But everyone is like, okay, and you might think, like, that should be the end of it, right? But no, it's not. Our friends, Bob and Carl, they're not having it. So on September 29th, basically, like, exactly a month to the date, of the completion of John's internal investigation, they published a series of articles saying how the idea to break in to the DNC's office and tap their phones was the brainchild of our good friend
Brainchild.
our good friend. Okay, we haven't met this guy yet, but our good friend G. Gordon Liddy. He is the finance counsel for Creep, which, like, of course he is, right? Like, of course, right? And I don't think we've made it super clear, but, like, can you explain, like, exactly into, like, a little bit more detail, like, what the DNC and Creep do?
Yeah, of course. So, first of all, we love investigative journaling and muckraking. So, the Democratic National Committee is basically the head or governing body of the well-known Democratic Party of the United States. So, a lot goes on in the DNC. It establishes the party's platform, organized campaigns at all election levels, local, national, state, all of the things. It does research, it does polling, it does fundraising, basically the whole administrative 9 yards that happens with the Democratic Party. CREEP was officially a fundraising campaign for the president. That's the textbook definition. That's what's on the books. But there was a lot more shady things that the committee was doing that we're obviously getting to. A lot of little invisible strings with all of these people.
They were
connected.
definitely creeping. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that explanation. So Mr. Gordon, okay, he takes his plan to our good friend, our White House counsel, John Dean, and Attorney General John Mitchell, who approves, like, the idea on, like, a small scale version to do, like, the break-ins, basically. So side note here, okay, like, John Mitchell, the Attorney General, he threatened Carl when he tried to call him for, like, a comment on the matter. He was like, I'm gonna kill you and your whole family if you contact me again.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, good on Carl for still investigating, because I think I might have just, like,
Yeah, that's
I
kind
might have
of
just, like,
crazy,
ended it there.
actually.
Like, I might have just
Okay.
been like, I'm good. Like, there's no need.
He
But
really held him at gunpoint. Okay.
yeah. So the articles detailing all of this stuff trickle out throughout October, and they're just detailing how the entire burglary was concocted by the Nixon campaign and funded by Creep, essentially. But throughout it all, like, Nixon and his team are running PR control like never before, guys. This is what celebrities, like, today, like, wish they had. Like, when you, like, turn on the news and you're like, oh my god,
NDA.
like, yeah, like, they're like, where are the NDAs? Like, what are the celebrities doing? Like, oh my god, like, where's their PR team? Like, this is what they need to do. They need to go look back at Nixon's documents
Take notes.
and, like, come on,
Go to Nixon.
do it like this, okay? And, like, I hate Nixon, guys, as much as anybody else, but, like, he had a lot going for him, okay, gearing up for election season. Like, he was aided by the potential peace agreement with the Paris negotiations at the time, and the American economy was in a really big upswing during his entire presidency. And Nixon, like, he squashed his opponent, guys. Like,
He
it was
won in a landslide.
it was really, really bad. Like, he went against George McGovern, and if that name doesn't sound familiar, good. It won't, because nobody knows who this man is.
Because he didn't win the presidency.
He barely won the Democratic election, actually, at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, he was super outspoken in his own party. Like, the party was divided over, like, several issues.
And the Vietnam War was happening.
Yes. So the Vietnam War at the time, like, McGovern's, like, biggest gripe was that he had very extreme views on the Vietnam War. He wanted to pull troops out, like, immediately, no matter if, like, we won, lost, or anything. And, like, people were not having that. Like, they were like, we're America, we win wars, we don't just, like, pull out of wars. Like, they did not support that. But something else to note about this election that was, like, super interesting is that there was only a 55% voter turnout, which was, like, the lowest in 20 years. I think even this past recent election was a pretty low
Voter turnout
as well. But Nixon carried all of the states except for Massachusetts. So
we love Mass.
yeah, their Mass has been, like, is a pretty blue. They're, like, consistency blue.
Massachusetts is my favorite state, and I'll go on record saying that. I love Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I would like drop everything and move to Massachusetts right now.
I can't say that.
I will run across the border.
Okay, guys, so the Watergate scandal, as you can tell by, like, all that information, is flying very smoothly under the radar. So Nixon got really lucky, and he was able to win re-election.
So following the original sin, Nixon made an extraordinary effort to distance himself from Watergate. He was very hands-off. That was not me. I had nothing to do with this. It was later uncovered that Martha, John Mitchell's wife, who was, again, the Attorney General, was one of the victims of the initial cover-up, and I don't use that word lightly. So Mitchell's wife was forcefully kept out of the public eye, quite literally later telling the media afterward that she was held hostage and drugged after she attempted to talk to the press originally. According to Martha, on the night of June 17th, 1972, her husband John received a phone call alerting him that 5 men had been arrested at the Watergate complex for the break-in that he was said to have authorized. So John left for Washington, D.C., leaving his wife behind in the hotel under the watch of armed guards, and she was not allowed to leave.
I cannot imagine like what was going through her mind at the time. Like your husband, like not even trusting you at home. Like divorce, babes, divorce, please, immediately.
This story is crazy, and again, it was never taken to courts or anything. So people have always questioned the validity of it, but we'll get to that. So Martha was known to be a gossiper in the press. She was well known for her late night whiskey phone calls, quote unquote.
Me.
And she pretty much
me texting my ex.
That's crazy.
One shot.
That is crazy. She attempted to call reporter Helen Thomas 5 days after the break-in, and she was interrupted by security. Over the phone, Thomas heard, get away," before Martha hung up, and when Thomas, concerned, attempted to call back, she was told by the guard that Martha was indisposed.
Yeah.
Which is a crazy word. Like, is she
dead?
Is she dead?
Like, did you kill Martha?
Is Martha gone? Like, what does that mean? That's so inconspicuous. That's so vague, bad. So ominous. Anyway, Martha later told Thomas that the security guard King ripped the phone out of her hand, threw her onto the floor, and kicked her. Abusive. So Thomas reported, and I quote, Martha was held hostage in the hotel for days, and at one point 5 men held her down while a doctor injected her with a tranquilizer. And then Martha also told Thomas that she received stitches in her hand.
Did she, like, go to the police or anything? Like, because I would have been sprinting, like, for the hills. Like, I jump out of the window, like, I'm on the floor, I'm running away. Like, I don't even know, like.
Yeah. So she didn't go to the police.
Of course.
But she did go to the media.
You know,
which is
close enough.
You know, she had priorities, I guess.
I get it.
So, unfortunately, at the time, she was considered a whistleblower, she was a whistleblower, and she only really made the women's pages with the stories. So, Nixon's administration went to great lengths to make her look like an alcoholic, deranged gossip back in D.C. People began calling her estranged, saying she was hallucinating, or arguing that she was just drunk, because, again, she was well known for her love of whiskey and her drunk calls to reporters. While this account never went onto court records, McCord himself later confirmed these stories. Despite being ridiculed, many credit Martha's expose with the discovery of the entire scandal, expressing that Watergate wouldn't have happened without her coming forward and drawing attention to the event.
Martha. Oh my goodness. I feel like it's so important here to discuss women's roles in society at this time
100%.
And the constant battle for recognition that was occurring. Like, at this point in history, women are not being respected. Not that we're being respected now either, but
no.
You know, like, still, like, it's the 80s. Like, up until this point, the women's rights movement has been able to do a lot. They've lessened the pay gap, they've gained the ability to vote, have their own credit cards, and the implementation of Title IX, which, if you don't know, that stops sex discrimination in education and related activities like sports. But however, in the 80s, there was a lot of pushback against these advancements.
We love Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Like, oh, queen, love her.
Literally love
oh my
Ruth
God,
Bader
love
Ginsburg.
Her. Love her. But the decade, like, opened up with, like, a complete change in political leadership on both, like, the national and state level, with leaders like Reagan, who completely were against things like abortion care, reproductive rights, and many other, like, liberal, quote unquote liberal, guys, social services. Okay, so as crazy as Martha's story, like, sounds, just like hearing it now, it totally fits the social climate at the time, really.
So Nixon's PR team and Nixon himself kept a lot of these stories underwater, and the mainstream media really was not covering the dark underside of Watergate.
Of course.
However, that all changed a few days later on November 22nd when Walter Cronkite covered Watergate for 15 minutes on CBS Evening News. This 15 minutes brought Watergate into the limelight, and the public began asking questions.
Period. You know, like, for a president and government that was so afraid of communism, they sure are not embodying democracy.
No,
like,
especially with the wiretapping.
Like, are you kidding? It's a pillar of democracy, guys, to allow for the press to serve their, like, checking function and, like, hold government personnel and bodies accountable for their actions. In fact, one could even say it feels a little fascist, very Red Scare fascist. But, like, y'all didn't hear that from me, okay? But, like,
and the Red Scare was really going on at this time. So it's like, and the freedom of the press and accountability is a pillar of democracy. So it's very important to have expression in the media and have a diverse media outlet.
Yeah.
So, outlet body.
Shout out CBS News, though.
Yeah, we love CBS News.
Cronkite.
Walker Cronkite. What a name.
Like, amazing.
So on January 8th, 1973, the Watergate trial began, and that is when the American public began realizing how many dark webs and plots there were hiding under a seemingly casual burglary.
Just another casual Saturday night in DC at this point.
Yeah, Saturday night burglary. Saturdays are for the boys, I guess.
Yeah, boys. burglary boys and beer.
In addition to the original burglars, G. Gordon Liddy is convicted for his role in orchestrating the burglary. He and James McCord, both of which had significant ties to the FBI, Nixon, and the entity of Creep, were found guilty for conspiracy, wiretapping DNC headquarters, and burglary. As more and more information comes out, others related to Nixon, including E. Howard Hunt, begin stepping forward and pleading guilty to save their own skins. As the plot thickens, Judge John Sirica threatens the convicted individuals that they will be met with harsh sentences unless they start talking.
He's kind of slave for that.
Yeah, he honestly, really good judging on his part.
Yeah.
While all of this is going down and things are starting to heat up, White House counsel John Dean and Nixon meet in the Oval Office on March 21st to discuss how to cover up the Watergate scandal.
Again.
Yes. And we'll get to how even this comes up, but they propose bribing the burglars as much as $1 million in cash to continue covering them. Now, this would be an insignificant conversation if it had not been taped.
Oh my god. Point of view, I'm committing a great treason against my country and a crime that will absolutely get me an insane amount of trouble, and I decide to record my crimes because what exactly? Like, why am I doing that?
So, when Nixon's presidency began, Nixon, as the paranoid man he was, ordered the wiretapping of multiple rooms in the White House, including the Oval Office, which is really creepy because when you think about it, there are a lot of, non-political people
what about, the janitors?
In the,
cleaning
the
staff,
cooks,
yeah.
Or, visitors, even.
Or, fart.
Like, the what?
What if I'm in the what if you're in the White House? I'm visiting the White House.
They're even tours. The White House is open for tours.
Yeah, what if I'm
citizens.
taking a tour and I just, I'm in the room by myself and I just gotta let one rip. And now it's been taped. Oh my god, it's so embarrassing.
Yeah, so all of this eventually came back to haunt him throughout the trial because a few days later, James McCord breaks, confessing in a letter read aloud by Judge John Sirica, as we said, that there was a huge scandal going on with the Watergate burglary. McCord aired out all the dirty laundry, expressing that the defendants had been pressured into pleading guilty and remaining silent about what was really going on. He also expressed that individuals had lied under the oath in court to cover up trails and that other guilty individuals had not been identified.
Okay, we're not gonna casually brush by lying under oath. If you guys are not familiar, that is called perjury. Okay, when the lying is done intentionally and in a court of law, especially under such high profile circumstances, it's punishable by fines and or imprisonment. I think it's up to 5 years in federal court, I believe.
It's a big no-no. Lying under the oath, no.
Don't do it, guys. Don't do it.
So as a result, McCord saved himself and got a very light sentence. And shortly after, many more began coming forward about what was actually going on. John Dean, the guy who had discussed the bribery with Nixon in the Oval Office, also began cooperating with the feds. And that's when the downfall really started commencing. McCord confessed that Creep had made cash payouts to the Watergate burglaries. FBI Director Patrick Gray resigned, confessing he destroyed documents that John Dean gave him following the Watergate burglary. And shortly after, White House aides John Ehrlichman and H.R. Haldeman and Attorney General Richard Kleindienst.
These names are actually so insane.
Yeah, these names are... I'm so sorry. I definitely butchered that. Resign, and White House counsel John Dean is fired.
Snitch McCord set up an Oprah status send-off. You're guilty, you're guilty, you're guilty, you're guilty.
And he fired the guy who came forward. He's just nah, you're fired. You outed me. Yeah. So shortly after getting fired, Dean confessed that he and Nixon had discussed Watergate and how to cover it up at least 35 times.
35 times?
And that there was audio evidence of the occurrences.
You caught me slipping 35 times.
Yep, that's right. Dean snitched. But why would you wiretap if you didn't want...
At least maybe delete the recording.
Yeah, okay. So that... All right. But like, you have to know if you're talking, like, can you just go into another room where you know it's not being recorded? Why did you have
closet?
Why did you have to meet in the Oval Office? Like, why couldn't you just turn off the camera system? Like, I just feel like it's gross negligence that he even,
honestly.
Yeah, like, if you're gonna commit treason, do it correctly.
Like, me personally, like,
but so yeah, that's right. Dean snitched. At the same time, prosecutors discovered a memo to John Ehrlichman. I probably am butchering this name.
It's fine. He's a criminal anyway.
Innocent until proven guilty. Assumption of innocence. Okay. Anyway, but he's not. So he's been convicted. Yeah. So, spoiler alert. All of them are convicted. At the same time, prosecutors discovered a memo to John Ehrlichman detailing plans for the plumber's break-in of Ellsberg's psychiatrist, and this is when the American public finds out that A, all of these burglaries are related, and B, they're all linked to Nixon and his creep committee. And so now that the feds were informed that there may be direct evidence linking Nixon to Watergate via all of Nixon's secret tapes, they subpoenaed. Kayla, do you want to jump in and explain what subpoenaing is?
Oh, yes. Okay, so basically being subpoenaed means that a court of law or a government agency is witness summoning, aka subpoenaing you to either make a witness testimony or to turn over documentation relevant to a case.
Yeah. So they subpoenaed, demanding him to release these tapes to be investigated. Nixon filed multiple appeals, but ultimately failed. He initially released a few but not all of the tapes, but the courts continued to press him and subpoena him to release everything. In a final attempt to keep from handing over the tapes to federal prosecutor Archibald Cox, who, by the way, was a Harvard law professor, Nixon suggests his buddy, U.S. Senator John Stennis, can summarize the tapes and present them to the investigators instead.
Literally, no.
I know, like, it's convenient.
Didn't you think that was gonna work? Like,
because, my friend can, like, give you the spark notes, yeah, like the cliff notes
like
of what I did to, like,
what I did wrong.
That's like, have you seen the TikToks where it's like my friend as a reference? Like,
yeah,
on the job, like that's what
exactly
it's giving.
What this is.
But so less than 24 hours later, Cox refuses Nixon's offer of tape summations. And in response, Nixon orders his attorney general to fire Cox, which would be convenient, like fire the prosecutor who's prosecuting me. But he thought he ate that. But as a result, Attorney General Elliot Richardson, because the other guy had already left, so now he has a new one, and Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus, I definitely butchered that name as well, resign as opposed to carrying out Nixon's orders. Solicitor General Robert Bork fires Cox instead. Line of succession. But this became known as the Saturday Night Massacre.
That sounds like a really good horror film that I'd watch on Netflix, honestly.
Yeah, like The Purge, like, yeah, but it's The Purge of the
Night
White House, like,
yes.
it's the White House staff.
Netflix, quickly.
It was quite the bloodbath with a lot going on and even more to come. Nixon, in the hot seat, then delivers his famous address to the nation in which he declares, "I'm not a crook," on primetime television.
And we have it, guys. We're going to play it really quick.
Let's play it right now. This is very important.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
President?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so
I'm not a crook.
Very famous statement on primetime television. He relentlessly expresses his innocence and that he has no part in everything that's going on with Watergate.
On like a peer review scale, I'm giving him like a 2 out of 10.
I mean, yeah.
Like, I mean, at least he got in front of like the public and he was like, guys, I didn't do it. Like, guys, I would never lie to you, the American people. Like, I love you. I love America.
Yeah, he said he had never exercised, like, he had only exercised his political position for the common good as well in that speech, and clearly something's going on. But, I mean, Nixon was pardoned, which we'll get to that, but anyway, yeah, he got off scotch-free. It was mostly his staff that took the downfall, but a few weeks later, White House counsel J. Fred Buzhardt, again, I'm definitely butchering these names.
It's just like worse and worse, guys.
Yeah, it just keeps getting worse. Okay. Reveals the existence of an 18-and-a-half-minute gap on a tape of a conversation between Nixon and Haldeman that occurred June 20th, 1972, 3 days after Watergate. So the White House initially had no explanation, and that's where Nixon's fiercely loyal secretary, Rosemary Woods, comes onto the scene. So Woods testifies before a grand jury. She claims she made an error, hitting the wrong button when reaching for the telephone as she was recording the tapes. While this may be true, it's speculated that Nixon and his co-conspirators had her take the fall for them.
I honestly believe the second line more than anything.
And I will say that there was like a 2.5 hour car ride after they initially discovered the gap where they were just, him and his buddy were just like going around Washington, D.C.
But that's so weird.
Yeah, right after they discovered this. So some people speculate that they like developed this plan while on this car ride and then
like,
presented it.
Of course, it was a woman that erased the tape because women are so stupid.
I mean, I guess the secretary would be doing that job though. I don't know.
Guess.
Either way, she was fiercely loyal to him and was willing to take the fall. All this time, Nixon's appeal to not submit the final tapes heads to the Supreme Court in the famous landmark case, Nixon versus United States. That's right, he went all the way to the Supreme Court. Do you know how hard it is to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court?
I don't even know how it got there. Like, I can't even get my parking ticket appealed. Like, they're immediately like, pay that right now.
Yeah, so they rule obviously against Nixon. Nixon finally releases all the tapes, and the transcripts of three Nixon and Haldeman conversations from June 23rd, 1972 are released, revealing Nixon's involvement with Watergate and its cover-up. These transcripts became known as the smoking gun. 3 days later, on August 8th, 1974, Nixon resigned in a letter which we have a picture of on the screen for our friends on YouTube, which was a very dry letter.
It literally just says,
I'm resigning. Basically, yeah.
Signed the president.
Yep. So after that, Vice President Gerald Ford takes his place. Ford then pardoned Nixon for his crimes shortly after taking office.
Yeah.
So.
Love that.
So they took the fall for him. So while Nixon got off scotch-free, the others weren't so lucky. H.R. Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, and John Mitchell are tried and convicted of conspiracy charges related to Watergate. In total, 41 individuals will receive criminal convictions from this scandal.
41 people, guys. Like,
that is a whole cabinet.
Like can you even like conceptualize 40 people, like 41 people being tried? Like, I don't even think we can put 41. I don't even think we can put all 41 faces.
It's actually more than a cabinet. The president's cabinet is made of 15 leaders of executive departments.
Oh my god. I don't even, we can't even like put all the 41 people on the screen because I can put all their names. Here we go. But like, imagine. Unfortunately, guys, this is not where the story ends, right?
Never over.
You know, they're convicted, blah, blah, blah. It's not over. Okay, so remember those two Washington reporters I was talking about earlier? Bob and Carl are good friends, okay? They're not just publishing, these quick little hit pieces, right? They've been working on a much bigger, full-length piece on the full, like, Watergate story, right? So they end up publishing two books on the scandal and cover-up. Yeah. One is called All the President's Men, and then the second one is called The Secret Man, The Story of Watergate's Deep Throat. And
I want to read these.
Yeah, this comes out 2 months before the resignation. Yeah. It's like new levels of investigative journalism.
Yeah, they got that out fast.
Yeah, it was like quick, dude. It was like super quick.
Okay, but like, who's Deep Throat?
Yeah.
Why Deep Throat?
Good question, because I feel like when people start like looking into Watergate, that's one of the first things that comes up, and it's like, what is this? Why is this? And like, where is this coming from, right? So we got to go all the way back to the beginning. So at the time of the initial break-in, Mark Felt was the second in command at the FBI. He oversaw like the day-to-day operations, and like he would be the one to spearhead the initial investigation into the crime. So Felt and his staff, like they interviewed like dozens of creep members, but the White House lawyers, like they also were at those meetings, and Felt like he thought that the transcripts of the meetings like were being passed on to White House counsel John Dean by the acting FBI director at the time, Patrick Gray.
More corruption.
Exactly. Like it was all over, guys. Right. And Felt like had an inkling that Nixon was involved. Like he was the one like playing puppeteer, kind of like getting everybody to do his bidding. But months and months were going on in the investigation, and like the White House was being increasingly uncooperative. However, Felt had a plan, okay? He figured...
He's the man with the plan.
...that a little bit of outside pressure wouldn't hurt, right? To get the ball moving.
Never.
So he starts leaking information to Bob Woodward, okay, at the Washington Post.
He was double agenting.
Yes, he was.
He was a double agent.
I love this for him, okay? The pair meets a whopping 17 or 18 times, depending on like what source you read, between June 1972 and Nixon's resignation in 1974.
Nah, this man is not.
Yeah.
He's not a leak. He's a faucet. He's a fire hydrant.
Yeah,
With that amount of meetings,
He is
spewing information. He is double agenting harder than anybody has ever double agented.
Tell me about it. So, like, Mark never lets them quote him directly, but they are provided with like all the first-hand information they need. So like, who needs a direct quote at this point? Like, you don't need it. Most famous of like their link ups are the ones that happen at an Arlington, Virginia garage, which are actually portrayed in a movie that comes out called All the President's Men, which we also have linked in the description if you want to watch it. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Wow,
like a little like, parking garage.
Yeah, so these were like...
Yeah. These were like covert. Like,
these were very covert.
It's like those meetings like where you see the FBI, like you're meeting with your drug dealer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's giving illicit affairs.
Like, exactly. Like, I'm meeting up with my mistress, but it's just like my FBI informant.
It's my...
like, what's going on?
You had to know his, like, these people's wives had to be like, where are you going
like,
in a parking garage?
He's like, oh, I have to go. And he's like in a full suit. Guys, if you want to aspire to be a journalist, be like these guys, okay? There were 6 garage meetings in total, 7 phone calls, and 1 rendezvous at Mark's house, actually, which like I'm wondering like where his wife was at the time, but
yeah,
like
seriously,
you know, it's fine. There was also 1 meeting at a tavern in Maryland for some reason, and then 1 on the record visit at the FBI office, which like I don't even know how they like swung that. Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, like you're actually like at the FBI office, like having whatever. And then like 2 other meetings that occurred, and all of this is according to like the Woodward's papers, which end up being actually sold to the University of Texas, along with Bernstein, that's Carl, along with his papers for $5 million in 2003, which I thought was super cool.
That's a lot of money. Like,
journalists don't make money, but these guys are making bank.
Yeah, they did. Off the books. I mean, I guess they got lucky with time and place about, you know,
literally.
Some journalists make money after a very long time.
Yep. 30 years in the field.
Like all humanities. Go humanities. But like the important thing is I'm still not understanding where the name Deep Throat came from.
Okay, fair. Okay, so
I asked you a question.
Yeah, my
Kayla.
fault. Let me answer your question. So the name, it's actually a reference to a controversial, but like really widely viewed porn film at the time. It came out in like 1972 by the same name, and
Lovely.
A lot of people attribute like the sensational nature of the secret identity to that name. And like here's a little bit more background. Like, let me get into nitty gritty. At first, Bob only referred to Felt as his friend, like the same way like, you know, we refer to our little situationships when we talk to our parents, like, oh, that's my friend. That's just my friend. Like, me, my friend. Like, don't worry about it. But
don't do situationships, guys.
Yeah, no, don't do it.
Don't
guys.
do that.
Don't do it. He would always say like, my friend told me on deep background, like when relaying information. Like in his notes, he identified his source as MF, which doesn't stand for Mark Felt. It stands for my friend, which like how convenient.
Yeah, they were really cryptic with that.
Like you're dancing around. You're dancing around. Like,
he
don't.
was like, I know something you don't.
Right? Like I know what you are. Like, come on. So the managing editor of the newspaper at that time, Howard Sims, he's the one that actually coins the name Deep Throat. And like for what reason, I couldn't tell you. There's no reporting on like why. Like maybe he watched the film before he came to work that day.
He's outing himself for watching that.
And he was like, dang, like this actually like sounds so good right now. Like let's go with that. So the nickname Deep Throat appears for the first time in a Playboy magazine in May 1974, where they're running an excerpt of the book, All of the President's Men.
Were any other names mentioned there?
Yeah, so oddly enough, like Mark was one of many anonymous sources that the pair used, but he actually just drew the most attention because of the name. Like, I don't care about anybody else. I only care about Deep Throat. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, of course America would just be like, hi, I'm gonna latch on to you.
Like, yeah, I don't care about, like, Gray. Like, what? No, I care about Deep Throat. Like,
I don't care about anonymous reporter number 1.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, no, I'm not gonna remember that. I'm gonna remember the Deep Throat. But yeah, Mark ends up being like super angry with Bob and Carl over this nickname, and despite like they end up being like super estranged for like basically like the rest of time, but like Bob and Carl never give up his identity, despite like everybody and their mother trying to find out who this is. Mark denies being Deep Throat in his 1979 memoir, and Bob and Carl like never confirm or
And
deny.
a memoir is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you're telling your life story and you're like, oh, I didn't do that, but you did. Like, I feel like
And my thing is, like, he
crazy.
wrote a memoir kind of early. Like, he was only like 50 when he was writing that memoir. Which, like, I feel
that's
like if
only
I
like
was,
halfway through your
yeah,
life.
I was like, if I was writing a memoir, I'm writing it when I'm like 80, right? Like, isn't that when you're supposed to write
What
those?
if you have like dementia?
Word.
Like, and you can't.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Maybe, like, I guess if I start
Like,
writing
I
it-
don't remember anything now. I like forget my keys.
Word.
I cannot recall. I
I've
will
got
not be
early
able to
onset.
recall my life story past like age 50.
Actually, so true.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe that's fine. Maybe
Yeah.
it's fine. Maybe it's fine.
I'll give myself to 60.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. Okay, and okay, this is like a little sidebar, but like a University of Illinois class, like they literally spent 4 years investigating Deep Throat's identity. Like 4
People were
years.
invested in finding
Yeah.
out who this guy was.
4 years investigating it, and they end up holding a press conference at the Watergate Hotel in 2003 to announce their suspect, and they are wrong.
Wow.
They were literally wrong. Like, it was actually so embarrassing, but like, anyways, the mystery, like the identity of Deep Throat ends up staying a mystery for 33 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah. It's considered a record for such like a high profile case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Bob and Carl were pressing like crisp, perfect journalism. Like, nowhere. Where are you getting that kind of confidentiality? I can't even tell my mom. She's telling everybody. It's on Facebook before I even finish saying it. Like, it's already gone. It's already out there.
I feel like especially then with like the media like taking such a rise. during
yeah,
that
I think
time
about like,
period.
like the case of, like John Benet Ramsey. Like
Yeah.
every single thing about that family was like published like immediately.
Yeah, and it's so hard now. I guess now it would be a lot harder than it was back then to keep things on the down low.
Yeah, that's true. Like, and if it was already hard then, like it's impossible now.
Yeah.
Like totally. Well, I mean, I always think of, like, like that anonymous, like the anonymous.
Yeah.
I mean, they're anonymous.
That's true.
But that's
true.
like hard. That's like super hard.
Yeah.
You have to be like really into computers and like, too much. Anyways, there's more. Don't worry, guys. There's literally more. Before the reveal in 2005, which happened to be in a Vanity Fair article, only 5 people, count them on your finger, 5 people knew Mark's identity, okay? And I do want to point out here that it's argued a lot that like Nixon might have known Mark's identity as Deep Throat as early as like 1973. Like, he knew that he was like leaking information at that point, but like he never said anything. But like he might have known. Like, no one knows for sure. But back when Mark was still working for the FBI and investigating Watergate, he was super like fearful that he was gonna lose his job. Like, he was scared. He was so scared, but he was still leaking information, which, like, fair. I would do it too. Like, in February of 1973, Nixon appointed Patrick Gray as the permanent FBI director, who, if you guys don't remember, he was who Mark suspected of leaking information to the White House at the time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was kind of messy, honestly.
Wow. So how long did he end up being there?
Not long.
Oh, okay.
His tenure was super short. Yeah. He ended up being forced to resign after it came to light that he had destroyed a file on CIA officer Howard Hunt, who was actually one of
Liddy's co-conspirators.
Yep. Oddly enough, Gray recommended Mark for the job, but Nixon and his chief staff were like, no.
They were concerned. Like, he was... Like, Nixon always suspected that it was Mark.
Yeah.
But had no proof, and, like Mark vehemently denied.
He was like, no, I would, like, Nixon, I would never do that to you. Like, I love you. I love you so much. Lying. He's just lying. So he ends up choosing William Ruckelshaus House, whatever, how, you guys know who I'm talking about, okay? He ends up choosing him, which ends up just being, like, totally, like, so bad. Like, for lack of a better word, it was a shit show. Okay, for Mark. Like, in June of that same year, William ends up directly accusing Mark of leaking information to the New York Times. And later in that month, on the 22nd, Mark resigns. Like, he just couldn't take it anymore. And that's, like, he ended a 31-year career at the FBI out of, like, fear and stress.
And those are the people that are, like they handle stress the best.
Yeah. Like, he was
agents,
second in
tactical,
command. Like,
Yeah, and
you
like tactical careers, like you handle stress so well.
terrorists and like all that kind of stuff. Like
you're tracking down, all of these things.
yeah,
You've gone through all of this training, like it's crazy.
yeah, to be like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. After he resigned, he wrote his little memoir denying everything, and he actually, like, as a little sidebar, he ends up getting indicted on some unrelated charges in 1978. He basically was falsely arresting people for protesting.
Oh, so that's an amendment violation.
Yeah, it was like pretty bad, but
That's pretty bad.
he gets pardoned by my favorite president, my favorite. Guys, I'm putting really heavy air quotes on favorite if you are not watching the video. Ronald Reagan in 1981. But there's a lot of like mixed feelings in the public over whether Mark is to be considered like a national hero or like a traitor to his nation. Like, I don't know. What do you think? I feel like he's a hero.
I feel like, oh my gosh, why did we just have this discussion in my English class earlier today? It's like, what is good and bad, moral perspective.
Yes,
and,
like the
intent.
ethics.
Like the ethics of like, you have this action, you do it, but it requires like a good intent along with a good action to be considered a hero. I feel like he's doing the right thing. He's between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
Like, how do you, but also like what? So he quits the FBI. Well, then he doesn't have the information that he needs, like to keep informing.
Exactly.
I think he's like you take an oath, right, to the Constitution when you get involved in an agency like the FBI, and you have to uphold it. You're still subjected to whoever's in office. Like they're in charge of you. They're the commander in chief. But so you're in a rock and a hard place trying to do what's right and what's constitutionally correct.
Exactly. But it's like, was he really violating his duty to the Constitution by leaking the information because what they were doing was unconstitutional?
Yeah, I think I think he was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
people say that like
the Constitution tells you that you can bear arms against a tyranny, and
I feel like I would consider this tyrant behavior,
or just like bearing arms to keep out the people that threaten the Constitution, that threaten democracy, which we don't necessarily have a democracy. We have a constitutional republic, but
yes, we're not gonna go there. But
we're not gonna go there. But I think he was doing his job to enemies foreign and domestic. He was doing his job to uphold the Constitution and do what he thought was right.
Because are you really preserving your democracy if you're not able to operate in democracy? Because at that point, the goal of that burglary was to sway the election.
Yeah.
And if the election was swayed, then you don't have a democracy anymore.
Yeah. And that gets back to campaign fundraising.
Exactly. And then if he was able, Nixon ended up he was reelected either way. So him being in power, he shouldn't be in power because he's not upholding those constitutional values.
Yeah.
So he needed to be like absurd or whatever. Like
exactly.
I feel like he was going about it. Maybe people say he wasn't going about it like the perfect way, but like how else are you supposed to go about it?
Yeah, exactly. I think he was doing the right thing. And I mean, when you're stuck in a job like that, where like you need to keep your job, you need to do your job well, you're providing for the public good, but you're also faced with an ethical dilemma like that. What do you do?
Exactly.
And I think he did the right thing. So I would say he's a hero for working with them.
Yeah.
He's bringing it to light to the American public. I mean, things can go wrong.
Absolutely.
If you don't come forward.
CIA.
That's the thing. People don't realize how much power the executive branch has. Like with the government, as like with it, like how it is right now, with all of these bureaucracies and agencies, there's a lot going on.
It is, yeah.
So you have to have accountability, and I think he was doing the right thing.
I agree. That is basically where Watergate kind of starts to end, but there is a little bit of a follow-up with our 4 burglars, if you want to just like briefly
of course, go over that. Because let me tell you, we're not going to get into it, but you can read it in the description. These burglars were very interesting people and had a lot of interesting backstories, conspiracy theories around them, but we won't get into that right now. You can read about it if you want, because there's a lot there. But even years after Watergate was settled in court, it wasn't. Our poor, they are criminals. Rich. Because rich because they had $25,000 or whatever it was deposited into their bank accounts.
Like
So our other 4 Watergate burglars who unknowingly got caught up in this scandal all have unique stories of their own. As Cuban exiles, they all had history with the CIA and fighting communism in Cuba with the Bay of Pigs. They believed they were helping the CIA fight corruption related to Fidel Castro, and they agreed to participate in the Watergate burglary because they believed they were preserving democracy. Several years later, they filed suit expressing they were lied to and coerced into participating by believing they were helping the U.S. government. They won the suit and were given $200,000 in each settlement.
Which honestly, like, I do feel bad for the burglars.
Yeah, so they genuinely thought they were doing the right thing. They were basically, coerced into participating in this political stunt.
Exactly. And that goes back to, like, literally exactly what we just talked about, like, you're between a rock and a hard. Are you doing, like, the right thing to preserve democracy? Which, like, they thought they were doing that.
Scandalous.
Yeah.
It's
they
very
just, like,
scandalous.
They weren't, like,
it's Watergate.
Exactly. Folks, that is Watergate. Literally. It's so messy. It is so convoluted, but I hope that we were able to break it down in a way that was entertaining and sufficient so you can carry this knowledge into the world and disrupt your social circles. Okay. That's what I want you to do with this.
Stay informed.
Yes. Stay informed, stay educated, and have fun.
And come back next week.
Yeah. See ya.
See ya.
You can find all source material for this case linked down below. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us at closing.arguments on Instagram. Tune in next week for another episode.